podcast role. Welcome in.
You're listening to An Imperfect Leader, the Superintendents and Leadership Podcast, a proud member of the Podcast Roll Network. Hello, Jamie.
Hello, Peter.
All right, Jamie, listen, I was in Cartagena last week visiting the Cahoa School, the Colegio Jorge Washington. It was an amazing week. I got to meet teachers and co-teachers and counselors and staff, and the students were amazing. And I met the incoming first grader parents for a parent meeting. I went to a baseball, they called it baseball, but it really was softball, a faculty student softball game for which Cahoa won 10-2. And in the top of the seventh, for which we were winning 10-2, the umpire called one of our players out when he would appear to be safe, and people wanted to complain. And I said, we're winning 10-2. And they said, yeah, but he's safe. I said, the umpire wants to go home. And so do I. I went to a dance performance that was the history of Cartagena in a modern dance. It was amazing. I found my apartment. I found a car. I did so much. And when I told people about our podcast, so many of them already knew about it. And in fact, my colleague Rachel said, look, you left us hanging. Did Jamie ever find his computer? I was like, oh my God, I love it. So Jamie, with inquiring,
is it Rachel?
No,
Rachel.
Yes,
no,
yeah.
I did not find my computer. I got a quote unquote new computer. It's a refurbished computer. I do not have a computer. Yeah, that. Thank you for that, Rachel. Thank you for letting me live.
She is just a great heart. She's been at the school for many years, and she definitely cares about you.
I love it.
It's very nice.
I love it. No, it's really nice. But I appreciate the care, and I'm like I said. I think I am impressed that people are interested.
I know you're like, what?
My life.
Oh my God. Hey, listen, before we get too much further, our guest today is Heidi Sipe, an amazing superintendent in Oregon. And I'm curious, anything come to mind for you as we launch into this?
Ironically, I am currently in Oregon doing work.
Nice.
I will work in two parts of Oregon. I'm in Central Oregon currently. We'll drive over the pass and work in the Valley tomorrow before flying out. And she mentioned her time at the State Department. And I want to talk about her time working for Oregon Department of Education under Rob Saxton. I am blessed to have gotten to work in all parts of Oregon, all over Oregon. So I have not worked in Heidi's district in Umatilla, but I have worked in Pendleton, which is not far from her. And the real connection is it was Rob Saxton that called her. And it was Rob Saxton that basically was the seed that allowed me to my Oregon connection to bloom.
Oh, how neat. What a small world.
He was a superintendent in Tiger Tualatin when I came in and was starting to work as a basically consultant supporting schools and having conversations about race and equity. And I was in Tiger Tualatin and met Rob and just really connected. And then he went on to be a superintendent at Northwest Regional. And so I got to work with him there. And then he went to the state and I got to work with him there. And each time you meet more people and all of a sudden I have another piece of work here, there, everywhere. And now actually in Albany, which is where I'll be, Albany, Oregon tomorrow in the Valley, his son, Sean, is an associate principal at West High School where I work regularly. He was talking about driving through the gorge. I don't know if anybody else has ever driven through the gorge. It is gorgeous.
Oh, that in Ithaca, New York, it's also gorgeous.
Yeah, correct. Anyway,
all right, why don't we jump into it? Because you're going to love this conversation. I know it because of the collaborative community that she talks about, the empowering of teachers, and just as I got to spend time with her and to see her again because she and I have met, you'll hear about that as well. We already have met at a conference that I was giving a talk and she attended our session. And before that, what you're going to hear is that Heidi believes in systems that really empower teachers and that reach every child. And so that brings us to our sponsor, IXL, which, by the way, the school that I'm going to is an IXL user. So that's pretty cool. IXL's research-proven platform, it personalizes learning for K-12 students, and it helps them, and it helps to take the load off of teachers while driving real progress. And it's trusted by 96 of the top 100 districts. And so to learn more about it, go to ixl.com/imperfect today. All right. You're listening to An Imperfect Leader, the Superintendents and Leadership Podcast. I'm Peter Stiepelman.
And I'm Jim Manson, and we'll see you on the other side.
We sure will. Today on An Imperfect Leader, my guest is Heidi Sipe, Superintendent of the Umatilla School District in Umatilla, Oregon. She is a nationally recognized rural education leader, a past Oregon Superintendent of the Year honoree, and current executive committee member for AASA. And she brings deep experience in state and national leadership and really a hands-on commitment to students, even coaching her district's high school robotics team to national recognition. That's so cool. Hey, Heidi, welcome to An Imperfect Leader.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
For our listeners, you and I met in 2024 at a Coalition of Oregon Schools Administrators Conference, COSA. And it was I think it was my first presentation talking about phone-free schools and practices, and you were so kind to attend. And
that was great.
Oh, thanks for saying that. I was nervous. And for the last 2 years, I would see you at a conference, and then we would both be hustling to a session or something. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Dr. Seuss book, Go Dog Go, where it's like, do you like my hat? No, I don't like your hat. Do you like my hat? I do like your hat. That's how I felt.
Read that very recently to my grandson, and you
Oh, is
nailed
that-
it. Yeah, very.
It's like
very
one of my favorites. They're up on the top of the tree. That was fun. But when I was preparing for our conversation, I learned that at one time you took a leave of absence from your own district to work at the Oregon Department of Education in the Office of Educational Improvement and Innovation. And this might be a random first question, but it really made me wonder, like, why don't we do that more often? Like, why don't strong leaders give a period of time to their state agency instead of waiting for people to retire and then they take on the second role, that kind of stuff? And so I know this was now a few years ago, but I was wondering, what was that like? And what did you learn about leadership?
Yeah, it was a great opportunity, and I'm really thankful for it. And Oregon had done a big transition at that time, and I had been a part of trying to draft that proposed legislation that led to the transition. And of course, once the sausage is made, it's never quite what you started with the intention. However, I do feel that it was a great time to strike while the iron was hot. And so I was really thankful. The governor, in our revised structure, the governor serves as the superintendent of public instruction. And then he or she appoints a deputy superintendent. And then the deputy superintendent runs the agency. And so a very dear colleague of mine, Rob Saxton, had been appointed to be the deputy superintendent. And he caught me at a conference. And he said, oh, hey, I want to talk to you about this thing. And can I give you a call on your way home today? And I was like, oh, sure. And so then he calls. And it's one of those moments where you still remember where you were in the drive. And the Columbia Gorge is so gorgeous, but I had to pull off at this certain location. Every time I drive past her, I'm like, oh, be careful when you take a call there. Because he said, hey, could you come be an assistant soup for me at the Department of Ed? I need good people. And I'd been a soup for 5 or 6 years at that point, and I'd done a lot of federal programs work previous to becoming a superintendent. And I said, oh gosh, no, that's just not anything I want to do right now. Thanks for thinking of me. And he was like, before you say no, think on it. Tell me for sure by Monday what you want to do. And so the more I thought about it, the more I was just thinking, I would love to do that work. I just don't want to do it forever. And I love being a superintendent. I really think superintendent's the best gig around. And I know not a lot of people feel that way on any given day, but I think if you give yourself a gold star on the days there where you did something really great for the system and for students, then it's a great job.
I love that. That's a great way to think of it.
Yeah, nobody else is going to
We
do
sometimes
it.
define it by the, right, no, I used to say, no one's calling you to say you're doing a bang up job. But to take a moment and often just to look back on all the things that you and your team have accomplished, it's pretty amazing.
Absolutely. And so I talked to my husband about it, and he was like, Heidi, you should just do it. And like, we are not going to move. Our kids are in middle school and high school at the time. I was like, we are not going to move the kids right now. I don't know how this is going to go. I don't think that's a good move. And he was like, don't you think 5 years from now, you're going to regret it if you didn't say yes? And I thought, okay. And so then I came up with this plan that I honestly thought Rob would say no to. And I said, what if I just do it for a year? If I take a leave of absence for a school year, I'll get in, I'll make as much change as I possibly can, and I'll get out. Would you go for that? And I really legitimately, in the back of my mind, thought this is my chance to say yes to something without really saying yes, because he'll say no and it'll be fine. And he was like, I'll take you as long as I can get you. And then during that year, it's going to be my job to convince you to stay. And I'm like, I want to be clear. I'm only staying for the year. And so then I had to go to my board. And my board, I have been so fortunate. I'm a superintendent here for 19 years now.
Amazing.
And ironically, during that period of time, I've served 19 different school board members, but I've always only ever worked for one school board. They've always been very dedicated to the idea of boardsmanship and dedicated to the idea of appropriate boardsmanship and really being united. And that's been such a gift to me. And so I ran the idea past our board chair first, and he was like, okay, but just this one time. And so within the week, we had to find my replacement, and I had to get transferred over there and do all these things. And then I would drive back and forth throughout that year. It was just a wild time, but it was such a good time. And it taught me so much about systems thinking. I'm in a smaller district. We only have 1,500 kids, K-12. And so I can have systems in place here, but not at the statewide level. And so it was really a great opportunity. It was also when Common Core state standards were coming into play, when in our state, the SBAC assessment was coming into the scene. And in that department, I was in charge of absolutely everything except assessment, finance, and special education. Every other department was under my purview. And so it was really a great opportunity. I learned a lot. I developed a great respect for the educators at the Department of Ed, and it really helped me understand where some of their decisions are coming from. It helped me challenge myself. It helped me deal with a lot of stress, and it gave me a whole new idea of what busy could look like.
If it's okay, I'd like to turn our attention to a conversation about your district in Oregon. And I recently spoke to Melissa Sadorf, the executive director of the National Rural Education Association. And it's fitting that after speaking with her, I get to speak with you about how one puts into practice the many things that she was stressing about rural education in the United States. One being the importance of working together both inside and outside the school system. And then I read an article about your leadership in Umatilla and how your teams make data actionable. And so one example from the district involved identifying chronic absenteeism caused by medical issues and then partnering with local doctors to provide on-site medical treatment. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit, like, how did your system help uncover these specific needs? How did you manage the logistics of these interventions? And I imagine in a smaller community, in every community, parents are pretty actively involved. And even more, there's so much connection in a smaller community with people within the system and outside the system. So how do you keep everybody sort of well-informed or as active partners?
Absolutely. And I feel one of the benefits of my career is I've never had an original idea. I just steal everything from everyone else everywhere I go. And I had a really unique opportunity. Senator Wyden had invited me to DC to go be a part of a discussion on rural matters. And it was in particular the intersection of healthcare, education, and community. And it was a wonderful opportunity, a great group of individuals. We got to hear a lot of senators speaking on the legislative side of things. And then I got to hear examples of really strong practices in action across the nation. And one of the things that just kept coming up time and time and time again was the importance of these school-based health centers. But we barely have a doctor in our community. That's a new addition for us in the last, maybe 10 years. Previously, we had a nurse practitioner that had an office in town, and that was it. And people had to travel, not a huge distance, in some cases 10, 15 miles. But for any type of specialist or anything else, we all have to travel a couple hours sometimes to see a specialist. And so the idea of a school-based health center was impossible. I didn't have the bandwidth or the capacity or the student numbers to demand it. But the needs were clear. And
Right.
so we serve the second highest percentage of English language learners in the state in our district, 100% poverty. And so our parents are often working multiple jobs. They're often doing field work. And so the idea of a child with an ear infection and that not being a big deal to run into the doctor, get them on antibiotics and move on is really foreign for a lot of our families. And so instead, those poor kiddos are at home missing school until the parent can take them to the ER in the middle of the night. And that's just the reality. And then everyone's tired and grumpy and not feeling well. They just didn't have better options. And so we have a fabulous doctor in town. His name's Dr. Earl. And so when I got back from this event, I reached out to him and I was like, hey, I'm curious if we could do a school-based health center without doing a school-based health center. What if we bring the kids to you? What if we get permission from parents to bring kids to you? And what if we start doing everything from well child checks and everything? We identify which kids are in your practice and we get parents to be on board with this. And we just say, hey, your kid's well child checks coming up. Want us to run them in for you? And if it's a minor issue, like we think it's an ear infection, we think it's strep throat, something that's treatable and quick, then we can call parents and say, hey, such and such isn't feeling well today. Would you mind if we ran him down to the clinic and got it taken care of for you? And he is so lovely. And so he's like, yeah, let's give it a go. And so then again, Senator Wyden's office was a huge help because there's some additional qualifications, essentially, that different clinics and providers can get to get a higher payout for things that aren't usually profitable for them, like a well child check. So for the parents who signed up for the health partnership, then the way that it works is we would identify, okay, this is the day we're taking all the first graders for their well child checks. And we worked with the clinic to get that all organized. And then we had the permission for parents to get those just immediate needs taken care of. And it was going so great. And we would take care of immunizations, just everything. Parents are still in the driver's seat. They still had the opportunity to choose if their child wanted to participate. On the forms that they filled out, it would say all vaccines except whatever. That was all available. And we were serving a few hundred students at that time with this program. Then COVID hit. And there just became this big distrust of, and sadly, both education and medical professions during that time. Everyone became an expert. Everyone became an armchair quarterback. And it was just really a tough time. So our partnership is still in place. It's still an option, but we have far fewer families that take advantage of it for the preventative care piece. But we still have a lot of families that if we have a student that has that specific need and we give a call and say, can we run them to the clinic for you? They usually will say yes.
Yeah, that's
and
great.
It's been a positive partnership. And the way that we identify all of those different pieces as far as who may have need is looking at that attendance data and trying to understand who are our chronically absent students. And then as we dive into why are they chronically absent, then we often find things like they're getting headaches because they need glasses. They're frustrated in school because they have a hearing challenge. Just things that we can
Child
solve.
wakes up feeling not so great, and parent just says, okay, I guess stay home because I can't take you to a doctor. And now it's a different thought of, oh, the school actually is our partner in this. They can help.
Yes.
I love it. I love also the fact that you talked about never having your own idea that these great, and I totally agree. I remember we did a sister city visit to Gainesville, Florida. So Columbia, Missouri, University Town, Gainesville, University Town. And we went with our Chamber of Commerce, and we always did a part of the day was to visit the schools and understand what they were doing and seeing some of their promising practices. And one was I was walking out of the school and I noticed all these high school kids grabbing food bags before getting on the bus or before going to football practice. And I was like, what is that? They're like, oh, there's a federal program. You can participate where we provide supper. And you don't have to prove anything. You can just participate. I was like, oh my God. And then so coming back to our community and immediately initiating that because it was such a game changer for kids who were staying for play practice or going to work. And so I applaud we should all do that. Where do we have good ideas? And I think part of the podcast is someone's going to listen to how you took what was a community-based for some and just redefining what community-based was. Didn't have to be at your school. It can be the community is opening its arms to the school who's going to bring. I love it. If you're
on that mind, the one thing I should probably add is the other really cool piece of the partnership that I think is worth replicating if someone can, is any profits that are made by the clinic for kids that we bring in, we split. And half goes to them and half gets put in an account for us. And then every so often they send us a check and that money is utilized for mental health services that are beyond what we can provide in school. So if a family has a need for intensive mental health counseling, we can say, don't worry, we'll take care of your copay. We'll take care of your deductible. You don't have insurance. We've got it covered because we can pay that directly because of those funds.
Oh, Heidi, that is amazing. That is really amazing. Well. If you're just joining us, my guest today is Heidi Sipe, Superintendent of the Umatilla School District in Umatilla, Oregon. She is a nationally recognized rural education leader and a past Oregon Superintendent of the Year recipient, and most recently, the COSA Colt Gill Leadership Award recipient as a champion of education. That's a lovely honor.
That was very humbling. I did not expect that. It was very kind.
It was neat to see online. You could see that your expression was so genuine of surprise and honor. It was really nice. Heidi, in the leadership model that I use to advise others, there's a dimension called nested patterns. And these are like the adult behaviors and the beliefs that build trust and turn theory into action. And inside that dimension is the term shared leadership. And I'd like to go back to something that I read that really speaks to teacher agency or putting shared leadership into action for you in Umatilla. You have this color-coded intervention system that for support, so it's like green, orange, red, gray. And teachers are authorized to make some decisions without administrator approval. And so would you walk us through that color coded system and explain like how the system empowers classroom teachers to take immediate action without having to wait for an administrator to give approval?
Absolutely. So every month we have our data team meetings and we use various intervention systems to identify kids that are at high, medium, or low risk for being on track for graduation. And we do this K-12. We've done it for a number of years. We've had a few different systems that we've used. And I think it's important to note that data work like this is really system agnostic, but you do need a system. And so then what we do is we have this very clearly color coded system of students that are green, and it means they're newly identified as low risk, which is a big celebration moment. And so on the agenda, it's send a card to that kid and congratulate them for their success. Send a note to the specialist that provided the last intervention that got them over the hump, whatever that may be. Those are the green kids. The orange kids are students that are newly identified as being at risk. And we've got to get on that right away. And our first intervention is always what's called a 2x10. So 2 minutes a day for 10 days checking in with an adult and just trying to make sure that we can establish a relationship with that student. And oftentimes that yields the information that we need to get a different intervention going. And then those red high risk kids are kids that are just still high risk and we're worried about them and we need to make sure that we're staying on top of interventions for them. So once the teachers receive those lists, then they're empowered to take action. And we track our interventions that are done in our intervention system and we monitor the success of those. And so each of the various interventions that we offer are color coded. Gray means it's informational. So that's something that we want the team to know is happening, but it's not something they have to do. So for example, an attendance letter, we send those out with a certain amount of regularity. And so if an attendance letter has gone out for a child, it's logged. So then that way they know. Those types of interventions are listed so that the whole team has that information. If it's green, and there's a huge list of green interventions, teachers can just automatically assign that in the intervention plan. They don't need anyone's approval. The team can decide this is what we need to do. They can make it happen. Orange, they can do that same thing, but they have to have tried 2 green interventions first. And then a red intervention is something like an alternative placement or a one-on-one assistant, things that are costly, things that are going to be a change in a child's routine or a significant departure from the normal program that we offer. Those need administrative approval. Everything else they can do on their own.
Yeah. I really like this. Often people talk about their MTSS systems but really I feel like you've defined or you've expanded on one's notion of what tier 1 or in this case green means, because it's not just everything's fine. It's let's also celebrate the kid. Let's also recognize the effort. I imagine when you see the parent, it's also thanks for the work that you're doing, because we're a partnership kind of thing. And there's some sort of additional action steps that are being taken that really make it more human-centered as opposed to just keeping track of data and seeing students as students and not children, right? There's a distinction. Student is like a cog in a wheel, and a child is an individual with hopes, dreams, strengths, and areas where they're working.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd like to ask you a question that I ask every guest who comes on our program. How does the term an imperfect leader resonate for you?
I think I am the most imperfect leader. And honestly, the story of how you and I first met is, I think, one of the prime examples of that. And I think the ability to just laugh at ourselves and recognize every day I'm going to do something new that's going to both shock and amaze me as far as how I wasn't thinking this through. And so the session where you and I met was about phone-free schools. And so I had been doing this large attendance project around the state and nation about attendance. And I had done a presentation the day before and it was really well attended. I felt like it went really well. And so then as I'm picking out my sessions to attend the next day, I see that someone's doing a session on attendance. And I think I don't want to walk into that one and make it seem like I'm trying to compete with them or something silly. So I picked a different session and I went to your phone-free school session. And then I could tell I had put my phone on silent, but it was just going off nonstop. And you get that feeling like, oh, that one's my phone, because we had all the phones in these bags at the front of the room. And there's one just shaking around the table. And so finally it stops and we get to the end of the session and I'm like, thanks so much. I'm sorry. That's clearly my phone. I'll grab it. And I'm thinking, what in the world is going on? Nobody could survive without me for 50 minutes. Come on. As I open it, there's my husband's trying to call me. My assistant's trying to call me. COSA people, the organizers of the event, are trying to get a hold of me. And I'm like, what is happening? So I walk into the hall And this superintendent buddy of mine comes up and he goes, "Thank Jesus." I said, "What's happening?" He goes, "When you didn't show up to present at your session." So the session that I didn't want to compete with was my session.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely
Unbelievable.
ridiculous. And they had sent hotel staff to check my room. In their defense, I'd been hit by a car when crossing the street the year before. So I am a little accident prone. And I understand where they had concern, but they had just caused the alarm, sounded the alarms. And I think that's just such a classic moment of we are all in these situations. The work we're doing is impossibly difficult because we don't just have to be experts on instruction. We have to be experts on behavior and facilities and finance, and the list just grows and grows. And it's very seldom that we get to say, "Oh, I'm just going to carve out a little me time in here," or something like that. It's just a joke. We look at our schedules and every evening there's something, and we're also used to just being booked back to back to back.
Yes.
Things are going to slip. And that's my most classic story of just something slipping. And it just wasn't on my calendar that I was giving the presentation more than once.
Well,
I didn't
and
know.
it's a great example. I love how you've sort of captured it as an imperfect moment because it is true. We all make mistakes or we learn from our experiences. I'm sure anyone who's listening right now is going, how funny that it was about attendance and she missed it.
Right.
It's like when you're the elementary principal and you're doing your perfect attendance awards and that's the day the kid is absent. It's just
Right.
it's always that case. All right,
Yeah.
we'll be right back. Hey, district leaders, I know you already know this. In schools worldwide, cell phones are posing real challenges on student engagement and mental well-being, and I want you to meet Yonder, a proud sponsor of An Imperfect Leader. And let me share this story from a visit I made to some schools in Silicon Valley. I asked some kids what they liked about Yonder, and after some funny looks, they shared that actually, with Yonder, teachers don't have to battle with them over phones anymore. In fact, one kid said to me he didn't have to worry anymore about his parents texting him in class, and the kid next to him sort of shoved him and goes, "Texting? My mom used to FaceTime me in class." I want to introduce you to a support system that increases teaching and learning. I want you to discover why 1 million students choose Yonder daily. Minimize distractions, maximize learning potential. To learn more, go to overyonder.com. YONDR. So I want to talk a minute about the Mosaic Project. It is one of our favorite organizations and has over 25 years of experience empowering students to really celebrate differences, communicate assertively, and resolve conflict peacefully at their outdoor school. I happen to have experience being part of the Mosaic Project, and so I can absolutely tell you it's an amazing organization. Their innovative SEL curriculum is now available to our Imperfect Leader audience. And so you can get a 10% discount through their new documentary film-based Mosaic Classroom Project. So just let the people know during your onboarding process to receive that 10% discount is to just mention An Imperfect Leader. Learn more about the Mosaic Project at mosaicproject.org.
When leaders think in systems, they think differently. They see the big picture, making decisions that create coherence and strengthen communication across their teams. They build adaptability, flexibility, and engagement. Every day, school leaders face complex challenges, from student engagement to staff alignment. What if your team could see those challenges as part of a bigger picture? That's what happens when you think in systems. It's how leaders turn complexity into connection and challenges into opportunities for growth. At the Waters Center for Systems Thinking, we help educators and organizations build this capacity, developing the habits and tools that turn vision into action. Think differently, think in systems. Sign up for our webinars, free resources, or a consultation by visiting our website, which you can find in the show notes.
We're back for segment 2 of An Imperfect Leader called Imperfect Leadership in After Action. And my guest is Heidi Sipe, Superintendent of the Umatilla School District in Umatilla, Oregon. And in this segment, we ask guests to deconstruct a decision that they've made, and then we talk about it. So, Heidi, what happened?
It was actually a very long time ago, but I always feel like when I think of things that were really pivotal in my career, this was it. I was a second-year superintendent and just getting my feet underneath me. And I had to cut $1.9 million from roughly $13 million budget. And that was an intense time. It was an intense process. It was also very emotional. And in my naivete, I believed that we were making this plan that would last us multiple years. And so I convened all of the stakeholders. And I just threw the doors wide open. If you're in the community, if you're a classified staff member, if you're a certified staff member, you're welcome. And what we're going to do is we're going to identify the problem. I'm going to explain why we have this much of a hit. And then I want you to just throw out every idea you have for cost cutting. And then what we'll do is we will price out each of those ideas and we'll just keep working through this together until we get a plan in place. And we did that. And the first meeting, one of my longtime mentors showed up and I looked out in the audience and I was like, oh, I didn't expect Al to be here. And so after the meeting, we were walking out and I said, Al, it was so nice of you to be here. He goes, Hyde, I got to tell you, I thought this was going to be a real train wreck. So I came to help you clean up the pieces, but it went okay. And so overall, it did go okay. But where things went really awry and I had to learn from and adjust was it wasn't a plan that could take us into multiple years because I was too naive to recognize that it was instead the start of the recession. And so
Oh,
that was
okay. So yeah, if we're looking, yeah. Okay. You wouldn't have known that. So I don't know if it's naivete or just being the victim of just poor circumstances that were going to happen. So let me just back up for a moment just to make sure that I understand. So here you are in your second year. It sounds, were you also teacher or leader in the district before you became superintendent? Okay. So you have credibility. People know you, they know your heart. And so for those who enter the superintendency from a different district and they're in their second year, they're still building trust. And certainly you were too in a new role. However, people knew you. And it made sense that you would convene people to harvest the wisdom of your community to make a decision together as opposed to sort of independently or independent of the rest of the organization to make these profound decisions that was going to impact about 8% of your budget. And it sounds, as you were talking about it, that if I were to ask you what got overlooked, it seems like you're leading me in this direction, which is I thought that the cuts that we were going to agree to were going to sustain us. And what got overlooked was, quite frankly, they may have helped us get to the next year, but then here we were back again. So would you agree that is something that was overlooked?
It was. And I also failed to recognize that the process to me at the time felt so inclusive and collaborative that I failed to recognize that it would still take a lot of communication for those who didn't opt to be in the room for that.
Oh.
And so the next year when we're having to make additional cuts and I'm trying to roll out another version of a plan, we had to cut 5 sports. So in 1 year we cut, and I could still name them off. That's how bad it was. Cheerleading, golf, softball, baseball, and wrestling.
Okay.
All in 1 year.
Okay.
And
the first 3, I was like, girl sports. Okay. Boy sports. I got a little nervous.
Yeah, rightfully. And what we had decided those by were the sports that had the lowest numbers of participants. And so we changed that. That same meeting, we also cut, I think it was like 11 or 12 teaching positions. But the community came out in force for the sports. And of course they would. But no one came out for the teachers. And that was really devastating for the teachers too. And hindsight's always 2020. But those were the big communication misses that I made. People can understand numbers, but it's harder to understand when you feel like you weren't heard, or it's harder to understand when you feel like you got blindsided by something. And that piece is tricky.
Yeah. What would you say? What did you learn about relationships? And I guess sometimes through these difficult times, new relationships form. And so I'm curious about that too. So what were you learning about relationships? And then what, if any, new relationships formed?
I made a commitment that if somebody's position was being discussed as a cut, and we all know that it doesn't necessarily mean that would be the person impacted because of riffing order and all those things, but it's still pretty hard to hear your position is being discussed.
Yeah, it's impossible to separate the position with the person. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I made it a point that I would send out an email in the morning and I would say, today I will be visiting with people whose positions are going to be considered for elimination. And at the end of the day, I'll send another email when this process is done. It might take me a couple of days, but I'm starting today. And when I send out the next email, it means it's done. And if I haven't talked to you, your position is fine. And that's when I earned the nickname Grim Reaper.
Oh, God.
Because I went from school to school and I would walk up to people and they'd be like, please don't talk to me right now. And I brought someone else with me so I could just pull people from classes and say, do you need a few minutes and things like that. It was really emotional and really hard. And for some, it really strengthened the relationship because they knew I'd look them in the eye and that I would see them as a person and that they would know what was happening.
Yeah, they didn't get a letter. They didn't get an impersonal email.
Yeah,
They would see it, I imagine, on your face, how painful this was.
absolutely. But for others, they didn't see it that way at all because it was still impacting them no matter what. And it didn't matter. I was still in the wrong because it was them and it was their position and it was their situation. And I should have seen the value of what they were doing. I should have considered, I should have fought for them. And those are all really human reactions and it's
Yeah.
fair. The piece that was really helpful during that time is the number of people who knew I was doing that day and that would stop me. And I started being a superintendent very young. And so at that point, I was maybe 32, maybe 33, very young. I became a superintendent at 30. And so some of the people that I really respected that had been my mentors when I was a teacher and those sorts of things would stop me. And they would tell me the stories of times that they'd been in a district where they got riffed, how they ended up here because they had been riffed. And they would talk about it wasn't handled this way then. And what you're doing is right. I know it's hard, but it's right. And the amount of appreciation I still have for those individuals is profound. Most of all of them have retired now, but it was no small thing for them to reach out and recognize how hard this really was.
But,
And I really appreciated it.
it must have been, I guess, what was frustrating for you? I think you could say to me, Peter, duh, I think you could pretty much tell what was frustrating, particularly being sort of what it feels like being personally attacked for what were fiscal decisions that had to be made that weren't personal, but felt personal.
Yeah. I think what's frustrating is just the fact that we're in these positions in education at all. And for how long it went on, 7 or 8 years before I was able to have a no cuts budget. That's ridiculous.
Wow. Yeah, that is.
So in the beginning, it was because of the recession and everyone was suffering. And that I could wrap my brain around. And that I think most of us could wrap our brains around. It was a really tough time. And we were all doing furlough days. And I told my union, whatever you do, I'll double it. So my husband was a teacher in the district. So they cut 10. That meant I cut 20. So my husband and I, between the two of us, had 30 days of no pay for a school year. And that was
Wow.
impossible. But I don't regret any of those
That's a
things.
profound move in terms of saying we're all going to,
Yeah.
that's amazing. And I wondered, because going back to that time period, I was an assistant superintendent and there was so much pressure when funds started to become available from the federal level, but they were short. There was soft money. It wasn't,
Yeah.
long-term enduring year after year. And so there was such a pressure. Oh, we can add these people back now.
Yeah.
Right now, oh, we've been saved. Let's do it. And I would say, if I were doing this type of after action review, that we fell victim to that. We fell victim to adding people back that probably, not that the people shouldn't have been back. We brought positions back that were premature,
Yes.
and they weren't well conceived because we hadn't done a real thinking about how we were going to use those positions, kind of thing. It sounds like, though, you were able to resist that to some extent.
Yes, I think and part of the reason this is on my brain right now is, of course, we're coming up against another funding hit and I'm cutting budgets right now and I'm in the process of it. And so it is a reliving of the time when it was the hardest is the time I relive every time I'm going through a different version of it.
Yeah.
And it's helpful and it's also stressful all at once. But the piece of it that still hits and is still a challenge is, how do we make the right choices at the right time with the funds available? And that's what you're referencing. We did all those same things. We cut according to riffing order because we had to, but then that meant I had some people move to positions that they weren't their best fit. And that wasn't really the best thing for kids, but that's just how it works. And how to communicate all those pieces is hard. And I think the reason we were able to survive it, and the reason I was able to survive it as a soup, was the level of communication that we had. But it was also pre-social media.
Oh, good point. Yeah, 2010 is really where it takes off, right? And so that time, yeah. Wow, that's really interesting. What would you say in the end was something that was good that came out of the experience?
We had to really think about what our priorities were for kids. And when you have to refine it down to that level of this is what our kids can't go without, it's maybe a good thing. We've also tried to carry that forward. Not perfectly, but we've tried to carry that forward as we've added things back too. And I think our district is stronger because of it. Where I worry, and I mentor a lot of new soups and I help find soups for positions and all of that work, because I do believe, again, soup's the best gig. I want to see people shine. I want to see districts succeed because kids succeed. That's what I'm here for. So the thing I see often is that new soups are feeling such pressure to make decisions right now. If it's a budget thing, it has to be fixed right now. And if I learned anything and took anything away, it doesn't have to be right now. It has to be over the next month. But over the next month, you can get a lot of work done with people alongside you, make a better decision. And I can't think of any decisions I made in isolation that weren't the wrong ones.
That's great advice. Our guest today was Heidi Sipe, Superintendent of the Umatilla School District in Umatilla, Oregon. And as I wrote down lots of different notes, one, making sure I say Umatilla correctly, but more than anything, you are such a human-centered leader. And what a joy and what a real treasure to have this time with you. Thank you so much for giving me your time.
Thank you.
All right, we're back.
We are back.
That she's great. She's really great. I loved it.
Don't you love the fact that I made her put her phone in a yonder pouch and then missed 90 calls from people who were worried that they needed proof of life because she missed a session that
she missed presenting at her own session in the same conference.
And I imagine as you listen to her, like, she's hyper competent, and no doubt that really worried people that she was like a no-show. And so
I actually really loved it. She talked about that. It just goes to she talked about it as relates to the imperfect leaderness of it all. And that we just lose. It's difficult when you're managing this many decisions and this many things. And it's actually astounding that I don't drop even more things. That's sort of a profound. I should give myself a gold star for that.
Oh my God. Like, you're giving yourself a gold star. I love it.
The trail is littered with things, with screw-ups. Littered with screw-ups. Oh my God. And so that one, I just could relate. I could so relate to it. I love this.
They were like, like jaws of life on her, going to her hotel room, and her husband's calling.
Her husband's, where are you?
I know. So I just felt
where are you?
Oh my God, I felt. When I'll see her at AASA. I'll see her at the national conference, and I can't. I'm always like, oh my God. Do you remember? Yes, I know. Do I remember? Yes.
Meanwhile, yonder is bad example. Bad example.
Sure, yonder experiences that you maintain possession of your phone. So maybe we shouldn't have sort of had their phones on a table far away. So listen, I did want to bring up one thing. I imagine you've got some things you want to talk about there.
I do, yeah.
Okay. So one of my roles as I'm planning for my new job in Cartagena and sitting down with our team, there's a real interest in continuing the good work of the principal who's leaving, Annie, and the building of even deeper systems when it comes to MTSS. So they have some really great things in place for both academics and behavior. The teams, the counseling team, the academic team, super strong. And I'm excited to be a part of this sort of continuing to really look at our resources, see who needs support, how can we leverage additional bodies to do progress monitoring. And so when I think about the work that Heidi was leading with her teacher teams, I thought it was super pertinent. At least it really spoke to me as I was coming back from this trip about they've got this system in place that gives teachers some agency about deciding on the intervention for kids. And it's a color-coded intervention system. But yeah. I really like that what I heard from Heidi is that just there's so much trust for teachers in terms of they don't need people's approval to intervene for kids based on certain parameters. And I thought that was pretty interesting. So I'm going to take that with me as I get started later in a couple months and think about where are the areas that teachers have that agency to be able to make decisions without feeling like they have to ask for permission to do what's right for kids.
I think you've just described what I would recently. I was in an elementary school. I love that. It's an elementary school that we were listening to students and staff and doing a little qualitative assessment. And I remember reporting back to the principal, I'm like, your students aren't interesting. Everything is fine. They are happy. They feel safe. There's people that they play with. There's an elementary school, is a 5th grade group of kids. And I'm like, and then I talked to the staff afterwards or next, and the staff's super reflective and they're not wishing for more people. The district would. They wished for things like, I wish I had more time in order to see more of my colleagues teach. I wish I was better at math intervention. The way in which they talked was like, what is this place? And when I asked the principal about it, it took a while to get that up and running, but for the most part, teachers make all of these decisions. He called them the soil, the seeds, the farmers, the plow. They're all of those things to make it so those kids are boring.
I love the power of language to really refer to that using metaphor. Oh, how cool.
Yeah. And then I said, I don't think you're anything but sort of the mist. I'm like, at this point, you're just sort of the thing that gets the area, gives them water. But other than that, you really don't have a role here. And that I thought was a perfect metaphor for what he had created. And
maybe he's the scarecrow to maintain so that nothing disturbs the fertile field. Right?
That's true. I think that's true. That's
right, because you do still need someone who's going to say, I'm deflecting that nonsense or this requirement or this observation done by somebody who has no impact on really what we're doing day to day.
Yes,
so
exactly.
Maybe he's the scarecrow in the best way.
I think I love that metaphor. This connects to something else that Heidi, the thing that we talked about when I opened with Rob, my connection to Rob, is that he, as a principal, I think that you will have this experience too, had been a principal of multiple different kinds of schools. He also had been in the district office, but he decided to come back and be a principal and was a principal at a secondary school or at a high school and a middle school. Now he's at an elementary school, and his breadth of understanding of the system allowed him to figure out what to scare away as the scarecrow. And I loved that she was like, no, going to the Department of Ed changed my perspective of what it is that they do. I'm no longer going, oh, the state's crazy. They do crazy things. I was like, this is missing consistently from public ed, that we don't move. We don't.
And in either direction, if you were to think of directions. And so what I mean by is principal back to classroom to principal up to central office, or central office over to the state level. To what system thinkers should be doing is changing their perspective to have a better understanding of how the system works.
Yes.
And so I remember a fantastic principal, Mary Korth Lloyd, who chose to go teach first grade for a year as a way to return to the classroom and really get a sense of what we were asking teachers to do. Yes. And then when she came back, what a leader she was in really being able to lend that perspective to her peers. And then when she retired, to be able to then serve multiple schools in these sort of coaching roles, because she had recently been classroom and principal. And so I do think that changing a perspective is super important. I also want to bring up the fact that you mentioned again about the scarecrow and scaring things away, and I do think that Heidi really does understand how to remove barriers. So, that scarecrow role is sort of like to remove barriers or to make sure that distractions don't impede upon the good work that's happening. Yeah. And so when she was telling me about how they had these collaboratives, these community partnerships, and the ability to say, we got kids with chronic absenteeism, we're gonna partner with local physicians, we're gonna do well child checks at school, we're gonna treat minor illnesses at school. If there are additional issues that need to be done, we'll get the kid to the doctor. And all we're doing, I think her quote was something like, hey, such and such or so-and-so isn't feeling really very well today. Would you mind if we ran them down to the clinic and got it taken care of for you? And it's like, I love that. Talk about whatever it takes, human-centered for children. It was really remarkable.
Yeah,
and it's being done across the country. I know. It was so nice to be reminded of what that looks like.
That makes me think of a couple things that relate to what the uniqueness of her. She is a 19-year superintendent.
What an outlier. I say anomaly, but that seems, I don't know, like a pejorative. It's just that there aren't people like that. Yeah.
No, it doesn't happen. But I'm super biased. So Heidi, this is me complimenting you on your perspective. And I don't mean to be putting anybody else down, but the perspective to say that in this community, she's a 1,500 school district. She can have a massive impact. 19 years. And then the board's moving. How many different boards did she say she had? 19 or 20 or something like that?
Wow.
It's wild. Her commitment to that community thus allows her to think differently. She's not stagnant. She doesn't think, I'll just keep doing what I've been doing, but rather, what is the way that we can partner health services? How do I get permission from parents to bring kids to the doctor because up until that point, there was no access for it. I was very impressed with her systems thinking brain applied in a smaller system that literally a couple of levers and you've got access to things that you didn't have in the past. Really amazing. Truly amazing.
I agree. Sometimes you will say to me, I wish our leaders would be even more vulnerable during their after action review. And I felt that Heidi was one of those leaders who maybe it's a product of being in the job for 19 years and being not afraid to talk about the fact that during a budget crisis, or it became a communication crisis, or just the emotional toll that comes with having to make personal connection and be transparent when making significant cuts. And I just stood in awe of her when she talked about a point that she may send out an email in the morning and it would say something along the lines of, today I'm going to come visit people whose positions are going to be considered for elimination. And there wasn't a surprise, and that it was just done in earnest. And there's an earnestness and a genuineness to being able to look people in the eye and tell them what was happening.
She took on the moniker. So when they called her the Grim Reaper, she didn't say, no, I'm not. No, I'm not.
I'm offended. No, it was like,
She knew the context. And I think, honestly, to be truly blunt, I think she's funny. I think that Heidi is quite amusing. And that amusing part of her comes from self-deprecation. That comes from a place of seeing herself as flawed, as imperfect. And so she's bringing heavy information. She sets it up. She says, hey, I'm doing this, which gets people emotionally, doesn't get them fully ready, but it gets them on notice. And then she said, for some, it really strengthened the relationship because they knew I'd look them in the eye and that I would see them as a person and that they would know that what was happening. It didn't come in an email. It didn't come out of the blue. And she basically said, I am going to have to talk to you about this. I know you know it now, it's coming. But they trusted the fact that, hey, man, she's willing to come up here and have the hard conversation with me. I thought it was amazing.
Amazing. Yes. Yeah. As you were describing that, I was thinking back to my own experiences in a large metropolitan district and like just getting a pink slip in my mailbox. And then it's saying, yeah, we have to do it by law. We'll probably be hiring you back. And they did. And just sort of like this emotional roller coaster.
I remember the same thing, exact same thing. You get a pink slip because the last one hired and they're like, yeah, we're not sure. Maybe, who knows? Likely though, because we always don't have enough. And so you're like, okay, when?
How do I explain this to my family? And what if they had been able to, I don't know if it's possible in a large system like that, but what if they had been able to send people to schools just to have a very short, hey, this is what it is. This is what we're required to do.
Yeah.
Over the last few years, we have been able to hire everyone back. We expect to do that again now. And if we can't, we'll come meet with you individually and explain what your options are, because we know we've got neighboring districts that are going to have need. Whatever. I can't imagine if that had been done, how even more in love I would have been with that district, because I loved it. I loved the people and the work that they did. Didn't love the system.
How often is that true?
Yeah,
that's a good profound nugget we should end on. I love the people that I work with, but I don't love school.
Not school, just that system. Because
Jamie gets to say school for me.
You say school. Fine. Yeah. Well,
such is life.
It is. All right, listen. This was a great episode, and
it was a great episode.
Yeah. And I'm really just coming back on this high of just visiting the school. So I am. Yeah, I can't wait to tell you.
I am very excited to Heidi really illuminated that broadening the perspective part of this job for you, that I get to now be in the stands watching even closer.
Yes. Okay, I know we're leaving. This is all the only thing I will say is because I'm moving into a principal role from which I have been a superintendent, and we had a meet and greet with board members, and there were certain things that were said that seemed, if I had been superintendent, would have said, oh, I think we can work on this. And so it was so easy for me to say, that really sounds like a really great conversation for the board to have with Dr. Gleb, because that is his role. And I look forward to hearing how I might be able to support that. was like, this is exciting. Sorry. Nick.
I love that. I can't wait. There's going to be more and more of those stories where you're going to be like, I realized it in this principal job that when I was superintendent, I didn't even think about this thing.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Already, I'm so much more disciplined about, look, we're only going to focus on two things. And if it's not a hell yes, then it's a no. Or I'm going to say not yet. It's a not yet. And so if we're not going to do one, if we're saying hell yes on three things, then one of those things has to become a not yet. So for me, it's the multi-tiered system of support because I put so much work into it. And I look forward to being a part of really deepening that work. And the other part is likely really just trying to build relationships, connections. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that next week, because the kids get a U.S. diploma as well as a Colombian diploma.
Oh.
And the systems are parallel, complementary, and still there are some differences. So I'll tell you about that next week. How about that?
All right.
All right. You've been
Good to see
listening
you.
to An Imperfect Leader, the Superintendent's and Leadership Podcast. Jamie, see you next week.
Yeah, see you next week, Peter.